What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show, and tonight we welcome a 40-year veteran of leadership and accountability in the HVAC industry, so let's get it, y'all. What's up, trade crew? Welcome back to the HVAC R&D podcast, the home of the trade crew, the voice of distribution, contractors, and manufacturers. We're rolling into Q2 with some serious momentum, and the show is growing bigger than ever. The HVAC R&D Substack newsletter is officially live. The Ramblin' Rhino column is back in full force with multiple fresh articles dropping every single week, and the newly relaunched resource hub at hvacrnd.com is now going to be your go-to spot for tools, products, partners, and insights built to help you grow in the trades. So if you believe in real conversations from the truck to the boardroom, make sure you like, follow, and subscribe to the show. Don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter so you never miss the conversations, columns, and resources built for the people keeping this industry moving. Big shout out to our Q2 partners making it all happen: Diversitech, LiveSwitch, RLS Rapid Locking System, True Nature Meats Company, Residio, and Mon Hummel. Now lock in, turn it up, and let's get into another great conversation right here on HVAC R&D. So everyone, today on HVAC R&D, we are joined by Brett Holscher, a 40-plus year veteran of the HVAC industry whose journey runs from commercial service technician to general manager up to national leadership roles across OEMs and private equity-backed organizations. Brett brings a rare perspective on leadership, technician development, and the real impact of acquisitions on people, culture, and the future of the trades. So Brett, welcome to the show. Thank you for taking some time with us today, and I'm excited for this conversation.
Hey, Rhydon. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's great to be here.
So, let's take it back a little bit. We'll go back to 1984. We're not the book or the movie or anything else, but what got you started as a commercial technician, and what hooked you early on with this trade?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've known a lot of people in the trade, and some of them wanted to be in HVAC from an early age, and a lot of us didn't necessarily. We ended up here, and I was one of those people that ended up here. Okay, I had different ambitions, things I wanted to do, but I like working with my hands. I like fixing things, and I didn't really want to go the traditional college route. It just wasn't for me. So I looked at a few things, and HVAC seemed interesting. So I went to a local community college that had trade, back in the early 80s, back when we had trades in the schools and stuff like that, and did that 2-year program, and then started working, and had its ups and downs, of course, but I loved the work. I always loved the being out in the field and different places and being around, and I like the temperatures. I don't mind winter and summer, and so it was just something I really enjoyed doing. I enjoyed fixing things and solving problems and helping customers. So that's kind of how I got started and just stayed with it.
You always emphasize that coming from the field gave you an advantage. So why do you believe having field experience is so important as you transition into leadership roles?
Yeah, I think in our industry, and it could be true for all trades, for our industry, having spent the better part of the first 10 years of my career working in the field, and then a little gap, and then I was back in running some projects, that kind of thing. It gives you a perspective of, I call it reality. It's you understand how the work gets done. You know what the guys and the women in the field, what they go through, what they experience, the challenges, the struggles, the good things, the bad things. You understand what the industry is all about. And if you don't have that, you can run a business without any hands-on experience, right? You can absolutely do that. But I think it gives you a more holistic view of the people that actually make the businesses work, which for the most part is the guys and the women out in the field doing the work.
Well, and over that time, you spent about 20 years working your way into a general manager role. What were some of the key moments that shaped you into a leader?
I think there was a realization at some point in time that, growing up when I was working in the field, we had kids kind of early in our early 20s, stuff like that. I liked coaching our kids. I liked being involved with kids. I liked, being that guy with the team. But what I found is when I kind of got into more of an office role, even though it might have been a manager, service manager role, or supervisor role, something like that, is I started finding myself helping other people solve their problems. And people would come to me and ask me for my advice. What do you think about this? So I kind of realized at some point that, I guess people they come seek out my advice. So I guess they must respect it. So I don't know if there was any one defining moment. It was just kind of a accumulation of things that made me feel like that, I really enjoy doing this. People seem to respect it. I respect people. I have a lot of respect for the people of what they do. I care about people. I'm interested in them. And so, really, I think it was just kind of an evolution. At some point, it seemed like it was the natural thing to do. And then, when I think I was lucky enough to work for some owners of the companies that saw potential in me and offered me opportunities to get into a manager or leadership role. So I think they saw something in me that maybe I didn't. And then when I got in there, I had success and I enjoyed it, and then it kind of went from there.
Well, and I think it speaks a lot for companies when you've got people that are, sitting there and they're looking at you and they're helping you be able to move forward in your career. And, I've been very fortunate. I've had people that have been there and supported my growth, but I've also had people that did the exact opposite. So I think being able to experience those different things also on your move up the ladder into management helps you understand how to manage people and the kinds of emotions that you're dealing with on a daily basis.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. We all, none of us do this all by ourselves, right? We do it as kind of a collection of people around us. And I think you're right. If you're lucky enough to have some people that you work for or people above you that see potential to help you along in your career, it's great because a lot of people don't get a chance to work for a good company. They go to work and maybe they work for it just may be different. Maybe they don't get those opportunities. So I'm very grateful for that.
Well, and you've studied leadership very deeply. You've written a book on it, and what does real leadership look like in the trades versus what people think it is? And I know we've kind of kicked around some thoughts about how you got into it, but
Yeah.
break it down to your true belief of how it shakes out.
So I think I learned from watching, and then I learned from doing things, and then I had a guy I met in 2005, I think, that kind of summarized this. And it wasn't his original thing; it was from the military. But we were talking, and we were talking about leadership and management. What's the difference? What's the similarities, stuff like that. And he kind of said, "Well," he goes, "Brett," he goes, "you manage processes and you lead people." And he said, don't ever confuse the two. And that really stuck with me. And I think about, leadership it's really about people. There's three elements I kind of say of leadership. And one is, making a positive emotional connection with somebody. A leader connects with the people around them in a positive way. And, another element, I say is inspiration. A leader will inspire somebody to want to be better in some area of their life. And it may be related to the business. It may not be, but, that makes them want to get better because of that relationship. And then, I think the other thing, really, I think one of the key things about leadership, what I've seen, and I've been around a lot of leaders over the years, different companies, different parts of the country, and the ones that are really effective, they care about the team's goals really more than they care about their own goals. Um, we all have our own goals, right? But when you're leading a team, you got to care about the other people on the team's goals, the people on the goals. If I can help somebody, a team member, I've got 6 people on the team. If I can help one of those people achieve something important in their life, it's going to pay back. It's going to improve the team, and the team's going to perform. So I think really caring about other people, maybe more than you do, maybe more than you do about yourself, maybe not, but you got to care about other people. It can't just be you're trying to motivate them, because motivating people is a lot different than inspiring. You can motivate people like a carrot and a stick kind of a thing. You can offer them a bonus, or you can offer them to get fired. But that is not leadership. That leadership is about inspiring people through kind of that emotional connection. That's what I've seen to be successful, and what I think I've been successful with that as well.
Well, and I think it's beliefs like that are what separate great leaders from the average ones. Like you said, you can motivate somebody with it, dangling a carrot in front of them, but it's a completely different thing to inspire a group of people to commit to something and help move everything forward. With that said, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen, from leaders over the years?
So I've probably made some of them, earlier. We all make them,
Haven't we all, right?
we all learn from our mistakes. But some of the things I've seen that poor leaders do is they manipulate people. They try to get them to. It's almost like they're playing a game with them. It's like they want the team to do something, and then they'll go to an individual and they'll try to manipulate. Might be the wrong word, but I think it's the right word actually. And they try to get that person to do what they want them to do for the leader's kind of selfish reasons. And it just does, it can work out temporarily, but the thing is that everybody sees through a leader. If a leader is a good leader, a caring leader, somebody that really is genuine and sincere, and somebody that's insincere and is just trying to play a game with somebody, or trying to get them to do or joke about how I got that person to do this and it looks great on paper, but you really undermine the relationship. People know when leaders are doing that. They don't always think they do, but leaders are very transparent people. Everybody on the team knows when somebody cares about them, when they're just faking it, or when they're just they're insincere about it. So some of those bad mistakes, and of course making emotional decisions about people. I've seen people get in very, very heated arguments over decisions that somebody made that was really based on emotion and no fact. It was just they flew off the handle, and they ruined a relationship. And so I think keeping your emotions in check is very, very important. I've seen a lot of people not do that very well.
Well, and what does it really take for leaders to get technicians and their people that are now the role players in their business to really buy in, aside from just, how do they build that trust, especially in the beginning before, as they're taking on a leadership role, and maybe you're transitioning from the field and you're going to go out of the work truck and into the desk, but now you've got to find a way to garner that respect from this group of guys you just worked with, or this group of people you just worked with. Sorry, lady technicians out there.
Yeah, that's a great point, great question, because I'm sure all of us have seen people that have been promoted maybe from the field into the office, and it didn't work out very well, for whatever reason. Then we see some that do work out very well. But you said something there that was really good, is the buy-in. I think the buy-in is critical. And I think there's a couple different kinds of buy-in. There's kind of the intellectual buy-in, that you explain somebody what we're trying to do and they buy into it. I understand the words you're telling me, I get it, but they don't buy into it emotionally. And then there's kind of the emotional buy-in, where somebody goes, okay, I believe in what you're saying. I believe in that cause, that purpose. I understand why we're doing it. And then they go out and, that makes all the difference. So I think it's a real challenge, getting, if you're thinking about technicians that might be moving into a supervisory position or something like that, because there's no real training, leadership training. You can send somebody to leadership training for a day, and that works great, but that's only a little bit. I mean, there's nobody there that really sits down and says, hey, Rhydon, you're going to be moving into the office, and here's some of the things you're going to face. Here's some of the challenges. You're going to have to deal with communication. You're going to have to deal with attitudes, personalities. You're going to have to deal with different stress. There's so much that goes into that transition from field to manager or leader, that we get to learn the hard way. Nobody really teaches you. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I wrote this book that I wrote, that maybe we'll talk about later, but was trying to help bridge that gap a little bit. But the buy-in is critical, and I'm glad you pointed that out, because that is a huge part of it.
Well, and I think the lack of leadership training that people will face sometimes can be why, I think it's a very positive thing for companies to promote from within and build from the people that they're developing and have brought into the team. But again, a lot of those people sometimes came in and, they were going to be a technician for 10 years. And now as they get into a leadership role, they didn't have the training, just like you said. That's also why I think you see a lot of companies will hire from the outside, which when they hire from the outside, here we go again with the whole buy-in problem, like, oh, well, you didn't come from here. Why should we trust you? So, outside of the lack of leadership training, what are some things that you believe companies fail at when they're promoting from within?
Yeah, I think this. I don't know how this is going to come across, but I've seen a lot of companies that they have the person at the top of the org chart. Let's just say whatever, the manager, leader in the business, something like that. It could be a service manager, or whatever, and they learned the way they learned, however they learned it, right? They learned how to be a leader, a manager, whatever their process was. That's how they got there. Now, the next person coming in, that let's say this person wants to move somebody in, it's like, well, they're not necessarily going to know the same way that this other person knew it. They didn't learn it the same way. They've got to come in and learn it their way, and it may be different because you've got different generations out there. And my generation grew up. Managers, leaders were different. Expectations were a little bit different, I think. This generation, people that are under, 30 or some are 35 down 20s, something like that. They have different expectations of their leaders and people. And I think it's been missed in many cases. But I think it's just a lack of, I don't know that the companies have a good understanding of what leadership is. And they bring somebody in, they think it's management, and it's more than management. They bring somebody in and teach them how to manage data, manage metrics, manage things. But leadership is so much about the intangible things. It's so much about people, not things, that I think we miss a lot. We just don't transfer that information to them, because sometimes the people that are in place now, they don't have it themselves, so they can't give it to somebody else.
This episode of the HVAC R&D podcast is brought to you by Diversitech, the one-stop source for contractors who want to simplify every job. Whether you're stocking up on install supplies, service parts, thermostats, controls, or digging into the legendary tool line from Hillmore, Diversitech has you covered. They're not just a parts supplier. They help build solutions for HVAC pros, offering pads, condensate management gear, electrical parts, replacement components, premium tools that make installs, service calls, and maintenance faster, cleaner, and more professional. Partnering with Diversitech means fewer trips back to the supply house, more time on the job, and less chance of callbacks because you're using the right gear from the start. If you want to work smarter, stay stocked up, and show up for every job ready, Diversitech is a trade pro's best friend. Now, trade crew, depending on when you're hearing this, you may have already seen, or soon you will see, the president of Mon Hummel have me literally jump on one of their filters during the AHR Expo. And let me tell you, rhinos don't just jump on anything. The thin line Ultramax frameless HVAC mini pleat filter is built for commercial and industrial applications where medium to high efficiency filtration truly matters. It delivers MERV 13 performance with low pressure drop to help maximize energy savings, plus high dust holding capacity for extended service life. And there's no traditional plastic, metal, or cardboard frame, reducing environmental impact while still delivering serious durability. If it can handle a rhino, it can handle your job site. Learn more through the Mon Hummel link in the HVAC R&D Vendor Hub today. Some of that, comes down to the culture conversation. So, how does a company maintain their culture of, positive leadership and positive mental attitude as the company grows? How do you keep that culture intact as you continue to bring people in from the outside, especially if you're bringing in someone that's an outside manager that, again, you've got to find that buy-in into the culture of the company on top of it?
Yeah, that is it's a big risk. It's a risk. It's I'm working with a company right now that they're very, very careful with their culture, which means they're very slow to hire people when they're trying to bring a technician in or somebody in. It's got to fit their culture, and so they'll pass on people that don't fit, that might have produced well, but they don't fit the culture. So it's it's kind of a it's kind of the personal commitment, right, of the people running the business. Is they're either going to, culture is one of those things that happens. You can either create the culture or the culture will just happen and it shows up and all of a sudden you got it. So let's assume
Yep.
somebody developed the culture they want, and it's really up to them to protect that culture, because it can go away very quickly. You can get the wrong people in the wrong place, and you can have a real problem. So it's a conscious decision to say, I'm going to protect the culture. And hiring people from the outside, yeah, it's a challenge, because you bring somebody in, they look great, they've got a good background, all this stuff, you think they're going to fit, you bring them in, you don't find out what you've got until you get them in the door. And a couple of weeks, you see how they're going to interact with people, and they may be great, they may not be great, but now what do you do with them?
Some of that comes down to their leadership habits that they've also developed over the years as well. So, what are some habits that effective leaders need to have and develop in order to make the biggest impact with their company?
Yeah, I think when you're kind of the new leader, if you will, or something like that, is it? I think the best leaders, they're committed to what they're doing. You have to be committed to being a leader. It's not part time. It takes full effort, and you have to be willing to invest the time, because if I'm going to move from the field into a leadership role, which I have, and a lot of times what happens is the other people in the field, now all of a sudden you left the field ranks, you moved into the office, so now you're a little bit of them, not us anymore. Now you've become one of them, one of the office people. So you have to kind of re-earn respect from a different position. And I think some of the best leaders, they invest a lot of time. They're willing to invest the time. They're willing to work one-on-one with people. They're willing to earn the trust. They're willing to earn their respect. The only way you can earn respect is through going through some situations with them. You're not going to earn it by telling them. You got to go through some fights and struggles, and you got to be consistent in what you believe in and how you make decisions. And people see that, and when they see that consistency, they start to trust you. They say, well, usually when this happens, this is how they're going to react. Well, if I react every time the same situation happens, I do it 3 different ways, nobody knows what to expect from me. So I think it's consistency. I think it's time commitment. It's willing to work with people. It's willing to put the needs of the team above your own. You just have to be willing to do that. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that, and they're really not successful as a leader. I'm thinking of one guy right now, it's been a few years, but he was not willing to put himself secondary, and make the team primary, and he was always about him. It was always about him first, me first. And, he would always go home on time and the team had to stay. And it's like, sometimes you're the leader, man, you got to be the last one that leaves the building. You may need to be the first one in the building. You got to be there. You got to earn it. And so many people are not willing to do that. And if you're not willing to do that, you're only going to have so much success.
The success and everything that you're talking about, I feel, and with your experiences, a lot of the reason why you did write your book, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but your book is Knowledge and Wisdom in Leadership in Life, which came out in 2024.
Yes.
And because of your experience and having worked with hundreds of different companies over the years, tell us a little bit about why you felt, called to put all this on paper and try to give knowledge back and wisdom back to everyone else based on what you've learned.
Yeah, thanks for asking. It's a good question. I started writing this book about, this is 2026. Sorry, I have to remind myself what year it is sometimes. It's been a hectic. I had to remind myself this is Friday, actually. It's been a hectic week.
I know that feeling.
2012, 14 years ago, about 13, 14 years ago, I had this idea. I thought, I need to start remembering some of these situations that I find myself in, because I was working with, kind of in a regional position. I was working with a lot of different companies and different leaders, and some were good and some were not so good, and some were new, and we had to hire some. And I kept seeing the same problems, the same situations that everybody's dealing with. And then you started seeing across the country, and I thought, I'm gonna write this stuff down, because nobody told me this stuff. I mean, I'm learning things that nobody told me. I just had to learn it on the fly, learn it through the mistakes. And so I thought, I'm just going to maybe write this down. So I thought about it. I started writing some stuff down. Then I kind of didn't do anything with it for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. And then I don't know, had some inspiration, and then I thought about it again. Then you get too busy or whatever. And then a few years ago, I thought, no, I need to write this stuff down, because what I was trying to share is, and why it says knowledge and wisdom is, there's a lot of smart people out there, we run into them all the time, that they think they know how things are going to work, right? They've read the book, they took the class, they've been doing it a little bit, and as not how it works in reality. They think they know how people are going to respond to direction or motivation or strategy or all this stuff. And until you actually do it and find out that people don't respond the way you thought you were, and oh my gosh, what are you going to do now? Then you kind of had wisdom. So I look at this as like, there's a lot of training, there's a lot of book knowledge out there, but then there's a lot of how it really works when you put it into practice with real people in real time. And, I listed out probably the most common situations that I thought I experienced and what I've seen other people experience. And that's why I put in the book. I said, hey, here's 15 or 20 workplace situations that I've been in, or I've seen other people, and I've seen the ones that succeed and the ones that didn't succeed. And then I have another section that's just kind of more on self-development, that kind of thing. But really, it was about, it's the same old thing. It's about sharing with, I just felt like, if I would have had this when I was 30, maybe it wouldn't have gone a different way. I maybe hope not, but it was kind of like, you want to share it with people, because nobody teaches you this. Nobody teaches you these things. A lot of these leaders I've worked with, these companies, I've worked with them all over the country, and they have the same questions and they have the same problems. And it's like, and you're going, well, why doesn't somebody teach you how to do this? Because it's not that hard. You just have to understand. So really, it was about trying to share my experience over 45 plus years or so, and what I've learned, and say, maybe this would help somebody else, even if it helps one person in one way. And that person, then it makes a difference in how they work with their team, and it affects the people on the team. Because you see a lot of times when you have a bad leader, it affects the people on the team. And those are all people that have mortgages and house payments, and they have families, and they want to enjoy their job. And when you've got a bad leader, or somebody that just thinks of themselves, it affects all the people around them. And then it affects, how they look at their job. Do they enjoy their job? Do they have a future? So my thought was really trying to help other people learn from my experience, I guess is what I'd say.
Again, to reiterate some of what you said, there's a big stark difference between knowledge and wisdom. You can go and read all the knowledge you want, but if you've never had any kind of experience in how you apply said knowledge, you've not developed or discerned the wisdom of what to do with said knowledge. Because
Right.
just because you think, like you said, just because you think this is going to work this way, it's not always going to work out that way at all. If any of you guys want to have access to his book, I'll put a link to it in the resource hub on hvacrnd.com, and I'll work with Brett to get some more information there. So that way, if you've got people that want to reach out to you from there, I'll make sure there's a means for them to see that through the show as
Yeah,
well.
that's great. I will caution everybody, and because I tell everybody this. I said it's not a literary work of brilliance. Okay, I'm an HVAC guy. I'm not an author. I'm not I wrote it in plain language, and I explained that in the introduction. It's plain language, what I saw, the language that I grew up with, working with guys in the field and working with people in our industry and our trade, and it's written for those people. It's not written for a PhD, or uh, they might scoff at it, or well, you don't know how to write a book. Well, no, I don't know how to write a book. I'm just trying to share information.
It's so you could have probably titled it Blue Collar Knowledge and Wisdom and Leadership in Life, right?
Probably could have. I probably could have.
Well, and thank you for those insights. I do want to also kind of dig in a little bit, talking about your history with some private equity and acquisitions, as we know that is a huge thing that is going on in the industry right now. Not only on the contracting side, it's also happening in distribution at different levels. I've suffered firsthand from it. as a distributor rep dealing with a contractor that sold a PE. I have suffered from it with a distributor that decided to create a PE company, and it totally changed how what my job was going to be or could be. So, you've worked alongside and inside multiple PE backed organizations. What was your first real eye opening moment about what acquisition really means?
Yeah, I think the eye-opening moment was when somebody, a common thing people will hear in any acquisition. It may be private equity, it may be a publicly traded company, or who knows, a local company may buy another company. Um, when they say nothing changes, nothing's going to change, and then okay, well then you see that everything changes. Okay, well then you hear them say, well, what I meant by nothing changes is we still do the same kind of work, right? We still do HVAC work, we still do plumbing work, and from the guys in the field, they shouldn't see a change. And I'm like, well, that may be true, but that's just one part of the business, right? There's all kinds of parts of the business, and those things are all going to change. So the eye-opening thing for me was like, it's kind of a joke now, is you kind of say, well, nothing changes, but everything's going to change. Um, but really, some of the stuff that, since I grew up working for privately owned companies, and I've worked at a couple OEMs and public, I've been around a bit. Um, Kind of drove my wife crazy when I changed some jobs, because she's like, when are you ever just going to get settled down? And I don't know.
I know that feeling.
Yeah, but it's when, and I've been through two acquisitions myself as well. I've been on the other side. I was a tech at one time, and I was running a business for the owner at another time. Kind of the eye-opening moments is the sellers underestimate the emotional impact of the sale on the people. Because I grew up small, I was a technician, right, working for just like everybody else, and working for a small company, and pretty simple, right? It's honesty, it's respect, it's integrity, you trust, and all those things. And you're proud of the company you're working for. Your company sells to somebody else, and you go, oh my gosh, now I'm working for the competition.
Well, I was going to say, a lot of times the business owners aren't necessarily thinking about all those things before they decide to sell, and some of that's not their own fault either. They're just, they're to the point. Like, some are just like, I'm done selling
Yeah,
this, I'm out.
right.
And then I didn't mean to interrupt that, but I feel like that's kind of part of what that point was really coming across as is, there's got to be, I feel like there's got to be some other way also for business owners to understand what their people are going to get into when they decide to sell the company.
Yeah, yeah, and that's probably what I've seen the most, is that the and I understand this. The guy that sold the business that I was working for, and there's a backstory to all this, but I didn't understand why he was selling it. He was selling it to an organization that I didn't like. Okay, so none of us liked it, and I didn't understand. I kept asking, why are you selling this? We're doing great, blah blah blah. The stuff, I felt like I had a career in front of me. And he said at one time, I finally pushed him enough, and I think he got a little upset. And he said, "Look," he goes, "I don't want to sell it right now, but the day I do want to sell it, I have no idea if somebody wants to buy it." And I go, "Okay, I get that. I understand that. I'm over it now." So then when you talk to I've talked to a lot of other people that have sold their business, and they all kind of look at the same thing. They may say, "Look, I'm at a point of retirement or whatever, or I'm just tired of doing it. I'm worn out. I want to sell," and that's fine, but the thing is that everybody else in the company, they're going to be the ones left to deal with the future, with what it is. And the people that are going to buy your company are not going to run it the way you ran it. Especially private equity. It's private equity. Okay. It's an investment.
Yep.
They are investing other people's money in buying an asset, and it is a financial deal. It's an investment to them. They want the company to succeed, but first and foremost, they want their investment to succeed, which is why so many people have experienced that it turns into a financial deal. It's a financial deal when somebody buys your company. So That's the thing I think nobody understands. They kind of think that it's knowledge and wisdom, right? You can tell them and they get it, but until they've actually lived through it and seen some of the things that happen, they go, "Oh my gosh, now I know what you're talking about." So yeah, it's there's a lot that sellers do not understand. And the other thing is, um, in a in the kind of the M&A world, you have the buyers and you have attorneys and you have accountants and you have brokers and you have advisors and you have all these people. And then you have the seller, and then you have the seller's people. And it's very difficult to find somebody to give you objective advice on how it's going to go, because nobody on the buy side, the attorneys want the deal to close. That's how they get paid. The accountants want the deal, they get paid. The buyers everybody wants the deal to close because that's how they get paid on it. But nobody says, okay, this is how it's probably going to go. As long as you understand it, it's okay. You can sell your business, great. But there's so much they can do to prep their team and their people to make it through this without some of the ugliness that we've seen in our industry.
Trade Crew, I'd like to introduce you to my friends over at LiveSwitch. If you haven't heard of them, they're developing a platform specifically for trades contractors and service professionals like yourselves. So picture this. Mrs. Jones calls the office. Her furnace is making some kind of strange sound. Normally, you would just have to roll the truck and go see what's going on. But instead, with LiveSwitch, you can jump on a video call right then and there with no app with Mrs. Jones. You can see things from her perspective on a fully functional video call. You can take screenshots, you can record, and you can deliver a different experience that no other contractor is giving their homeowners right now. If you're worried about it working with stuff you're already using, you know what? It integrates perfectly into Jobber, ServiceTitan, HouseCall Pro, any of the stuff that you guys are already using. It makes it a seamless transition to add this new tool to your arsenal. Go to hvacrnd.com, visit the vendor hub, set up your LiveSwitch demo today. You can also click the link down in the description below, or you can find the link to the demo in my bio. Thanks everybody for listening to the show. Check out LiveSwitch. I promise you it is an app for you. It gives you an ability to do something completely different for homeowners that no one else is doing right now. You guys won't be disappointed. Go schedule your demo today. Trade Crew, let me ask you something. How many leads are you paying for right now that never actually turn into book jobs? That's where Chirp comes in. Chirp is built specifically for home service companies to help automate your follow-up through text, email, voicemail drops, and now AI-powered conversations. So your leads aren't sitting there going cold while you're out running calls. Because the reality is, speed to lead matters. If somebody fills out an online form and doesn't hear back quickly, they're already calling the next contractor. Chirp helps bridge the gap by instantly starting the conversation and keeping follow-up moving automatically. And what I really like is that it still feels human and not robotic. It integrates with platforms like HouseCall Pro, ServiceTitan, FieldPulse, Jobber, and more, helping you stay in front of customers without creating more office chaos. If you want to convert more leads that you're already paying for, head over to Chirp, automate the follow-up, and close more deals. Make sure to go to the hvacrnd.com resource hub and book your demo today and find out more about what is truly the most badass AI lead conversion system in the trades. Well, and I think that comes down to if a person knows they're going to eventually sell, it's important that they actually, go and ask some questions and figure out how to build a transition plan. But like you said, a lot of them just hit a wall and they're done. So for owners that are considering selling in the future and want to put a transition plan in place, what are some questions that they should be asking, and what are some things they should be preparing their, underling management to understand and their employees to understand about how things could or couldn't go when they sell the company?
Yeah, that's huge. So I'm not a financial person. I'm not a banker or anything like that, but I have talked to a number of them. And if I'm going to sell my business in 2 years, 2 or 3 years, something like that, a couple, 2 or 3 years, there's a lot of financial cleanup that these sellers need to do with their books. They've got to get it into a, because if they don't do it, the buying company is going to do it for them. But there's a lot they can do on the way they do their accounting that's going to make it more transparent. It's going to make it easier to value the company. So there's financial cleanup. There is with the other thing is really transition of leadership, because when a company buys when you buy my company, Rhydon buys my company, and Rhydon says, "Hey, I'm going to give you a check for $5 million or whatever," and you've just put $5 million in my company, and you want the company to work, right? Because you want to get your money back. Well, if Brett says, "Well, Rhydon, as soon as I sell my company 6 months from now, I'm headed to the beach. I'm not coming back. I'm out." Well, then the big risk is, well, who's the leader behind you? Who's the brand? Who's the leadership of the business? The leadership is what's at risk. So that transition, that leadership transition is crucial. So not only is it getting your accounting in order, but it's getting the succession plan in order. Who's coming up behind you? Who are you developing? Who are you training? What's your plan for continued leadership if you decide to bug out in 6 months or a year or something like that? There's a lot that can go into that, and there are M&A advisors that can advise people on that. You can find a lot of that stuff online about what to prep for, but the leadership succession is something that is crucial, because the buyer wants to know there's leadership there if that seller does decide to check out early.
Well, and that kind of asked one of the questions I was going to say is, what does that leadership role really play in making or breaking the transition to the purchaser? But also, what are some of the big cultural risks when a company is purchased and, the plan might actually be that they're going to get rolled up into a bigger organization altogether? What are some of the things that can be put in place to help mitigate those risks?
Yeah, so if I'm selling my business, because there's a lot of, in the last 5 6 years, there's a lot of business trades, not just HVAC, but plumbing, electrical, but all the trades. There's kind of this resistance to sell to PE now. A lot of companies, you see more of it, that they say, "Hey, I don't want to sell it to private equity. I want to sell it to a private company, or maybe a local company, or whatever." So if the seller says, "I'm going to sell it to private equity," then they need to understand that prepping the people for the differences, because private equity, they look at, they want growth, they want fast growth, they want everything moves quickly. They've got people there that implement change, that implement new processes, procedures, accounting measures, all these kind of things. And these local companies are not used to working at that pace. Okay, they might be used to working at the pace that Brett was owning the company, and Brett worked at this pace, and everything was great. Well, now we sold it to this other company that we call a fast growth company. If they say we're a fast growth company, what that means is they intend to grow fast. It's not a joke. It's not just a nice word to say, "Oh, it sounds cool." If they're fast growth, they want quick growth, which means they want people to go out and push growth, push additional revenue things, push more production, push these things that just probably wasn't part of the culture before. The culture might have been more of a stable culture, maybe a good culture, slow growth, grow within the community. And now all of a sudden they're said, "Hey, we got to go out and grow like now. What have you done for me today? And why aren't you doing this tomorrow?" It's complete change in culture. Communication is different. The pace of change is different. The expectations are different. They expect results quicker. They expect response. They expect all these things much faster than privately owned companies are used to dealing with.
I don't think all, not right word, I about said transactions, but I meant acquisitions. Not all acquisitions are necessarily bad. What do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions about private equity in the trades right now, in terms of not all acquisitions are a bad thing?
Yeah, I think that that's a good point, because you're 100% right. Is that if they were all bad, they would stop doing them, right? Because they would all fail and everybody would lose their money. So I think the truth is, the reality is it could be, this could be just what I've heard. They might say that 90% of them are fine, or 90% of them, or maybe 80%, 80 or 90% are, they work out. They got some struggles. There's always going to be some struggles. I mean, I heard a guy tell me a few years ago. He said, "Well, when your company gets acquired, it's kind of like you're going through a it's kind of like you're going through a forced divorce and a forced marriage all at the same time." And I thought that is classic. So I've always remembered that. But the good ones, most of them do work out, and I think by and large, not all, but most of the private equity companies, they want them to work. They don't want to tear a company up. They don't want to do this stuff. So one of the things I think that really leads into a good relationship and a good deal is really, it's simply honesty and openness with questions. What's going to happen to my company? What's going to happen to my people? What kind of culture are you going to bring in? Ask them the questions. If the private equity company is honest with them, even if it might not be the right answer that seller wants to hear, but they're honest with them, then you can have a really good relationship. Because at the end of the day, that the person that sold their business, if I'm in a role, in like a regional role, and the person sold their business, I'm going to have a relationship with them because my job is to help them. And if the company that bought them lied to them, told them, misled them, now I have to go in there and figure it out and fix it. It makes it a lot tougher. So I think just demanding, or honesty and open questions is really, really important. And if I'm one of the guys, if I'm a seller and I'm the guy that says, I'm tired, I'm fed up, I've had enough, I hate this, I'm going to sell it to the first guy that offers me whatever I want, and I go sell it, and I take the check and I leave, and here you can have my company, all my people. Well, that guy doesn't care about the future of his business and his people, right? He's just had enough. But if anybody's selling their business, they do care about their culture. They do care about their people. They do care about their customers. They need to really vet out these people that are buying them, and talk to other people that have sold to them. You're not always going to get the truth, but you theoretically would get a better answer than if you didn't talk to anybody. But it's honesty, and do I have a good feel about these people I'm dealing with? Do I trust them? Do I not trust them? But most of them do work out. They all have their bumps. They're all different. But I would say by and large, 80, 90% of them do work out, but there are 10 or 20% that don't.
One thing we've not talked about in the whole discussion of that is, you've got purchaser and you've got seller, but the other thing that also made a huge impact of whether or not the company that's being sold or purchased, some things that really made those companies positive were the relationships that those contractors had with distribution. And I think there's a lot of cases where the relationships that the contractor that's selling the business has with people are greatly also affected, and people don't ever consider some of that. And I've seen that personally. I've seen a business sell for a great amount of money. Actually, a couple of different businesses sell for a great amount of money, and then the territory manager and the couple of distributors that really had helped support that company for 30 plus years, all of a sudden they just get fired because the company buying this company was like, well, I got a relationship over here. The problem is all the people that are working for the company you just bought don't have the relationship with those people over here. They have them with this group of people. So, what have you seen, or have you seen any companies that actually try to, stick with some of those things the way they were? Or does almost every single acquisition come down to, well, we're going to move everything to this group of suppliers because that's who we've made deals with, period?
Yeah, I'm probably I'm going to give it, I'll tell you, but the answer I give is not the answer most will hear. What I tell people, I think I had this conversation last week, if not earlier this week. I said, look, we all want loyal customers. I want a customer to be loyal to me. So if we're not a loyal customer to our vendor, then how can we expect people to be loyal to us if we're not a loyal customer? Now, so I just tell them, I said, look, you keep dealing with the distributor. If you've got a relationship with, they do a good job for you. You've built your business on them. The company may want you to change vendors, but I'm telling you, you're going to have to make them drag you to change that vendor. Don't just walk away from that relationship, or else how can you expect anybody to be a loyal customer to you? People will drop you for a dime. If you're going to drop that vendor, that supplier for a dime, dude, they're going to do this. People are going to do the same thing to you, because that's the culture you're building. So what happens is a lot of these big companies, and it doesn't have to be PE, it can be anything. They, as you know, they get national deals, and they say, well, if you buy $10 million, then we're going to give you 0.5% back in a rebate, or a rebate at the end of the year. And so then when these companies buy these smaller companies, they want you to flip over to that distributor, because it helps them get to that $10 million threshold, or $1 million, whatever it is. And they're doing it to get the rebate money back. So again, it all goes back to, it all becomes a financial decision, and you ignore and throw out the personal relationship that maybe somebody had for 10 years. Maybe you and I had a relationship, and I bought stuff from you for 10 years, and we knew each other's kids. Maybe, how you do with personal things. And man, you jumped through and you delivered stuff on the weekend, and at night I could call you and get stuff done. And then Monday, my company says, hey, you got to drop Rhydon and you got to go sign up with these guys over here. And I don't even know who they are. And I may go talk to them, and I go, I don't even like those guys. So I think there's the selling company has more clout, power, authority than they think they do. This is one thing I have learned. I've seen this personally, is parent company, platform company buys that company over there. If that leader and those people walk out of that company they just bought, that investment is going to go to zero. Okay. Now, if I tell that company, hey, you got to stop using Ferguson or whoever, you got to use those guys over there, and that guy says, no, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to fire him over it, because if I fire him, then I'm now just going to have all the leadership leave the company. They got to have the guts to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I've got a great relationship here. It's important. My company is performing. That supplier right there is part of why my company performs the way it does. And if I lose that relationship and I lose that, my company is not going to perform the same way it did. And it's not going to, you're going to lose money on the deal. So it can be confrontational, but the parent company, they might push the deal, and they might, but they'll back off too if you really stand by your guns. I mean, you can stand by your guns. A lot of them will slow down, back off. Okay, well, let's give it 6 months, see how it goes, type thing. But that's one thing that sellers don't understand, or the people don't understand, is that they've got a lot of say in what really happens. They don't think they do, because they're afraid, because they got bought. They just got acquired, and they think everybody, oh my God, those guys are all smarter than me. They know more than me. They come in here, they tell me what to do, and I can't stand up to them at all. You can. You just have to do it in a respectful, honest way, again, in a good relationship way. But it's a problem, man. I got to tell you, I feel bad for a lot of the distributors and the suppliers, because they can just get cut out in a heartbeat, and they did nothing wrong. They've been doing everything right for 10 years, and pretty soon they just lost a $2 million a year customer.
Trade crew, let's be real for a second. Most callbacks aren't because the system doesn't heat or cool. They're because something small got overlooked. And condensate issues, that's one of the biggest ones. That's why I like the Assurity system from Diversitech. It's a full approach. Pans, switches, pumps, all designed to work together and create redundancy, so you're not relying on just one line of defense. Because when water gets loose in a house, that gets expensive. Fast. Now here's the kicker. When you install it the right way, you can back it with the Assurity Promise. That's up to $2,500 in water damage protection. That's a big deal for your customers and for you and your business. Just go online to AssurityHVACR.com. It's easy to register, tied to your install, and now you've got another way to stand behind your work. That's how you separate yourself. Ask your local distributor about a surety from Diversitech today. What's up, trade crew? You've heard the buzz, you've seen the press gang at every single AHR. Contractors across the country are ditching their torches for RLS press fittings, and they're not looking back. Why? Because RLS lets you finish faster, safer, and cleaner. From rooftops to mechanical rooms, crawl spaces, and attics, it's a press and go solution that's leak tested, UL recognized, and proudly made in America. Make the switch to RLS and take the heat out of your installs, literally. RLS, rapid locking system, press forward and press on. We've unpacked a lot of different things. I want to ask a few more questions, just kind of about people, for one, but also, kind of some deeper thought, food for thought for the future of the trades.
Mm-hmm.
And we started, I use this kind of as an example of a way I might phrase a question earlier, but we live in this world that is now heavily focused on revenue, tickets, upsells, KPIs and metrics and everything else. But one thing I believe you and I both value more than any of that is people. So how do we find a way to help leaders understand that we have to bring some of this back to really talk about quality and integrity in people and relationships?
Well, it's a challenge. It is a challenge, and you're right. Everything has become not all the time, but if you get acquired by a larger business that made an investment, they want their investment back as soon as possible, which means they're going to drive you on what you said. It's metrics, it's KPIs, it's revenue per producer, it's upselling, it's average ticket, it's number of tickets, all this stuff. They're driving revenue all the time. But what I found is, at least when I grew up when I was a tech and grew up out there, is most of the guys and the few women out there that were technicians, most of them wanted to do a good job. They wanted to be proud of what they did. They wanted to be able to do quality work. They wanted to get better at their trade. They wanted respect because their job is not easy, right? I grew up, you're working out. It was wintertime, it got cold, and summertime it got hot, and it rained, and it was crappy, and all those things. It's not an easy job. And that's where I think coming from the field gives me an angle, because I appreciate that and I respect that. So I think there's a couple things. Leaders have they've got to have the guts to stand up for the people. They can't roll over, and you've got to be able to say, I'll get the production out of the team, but I'm going to respect the people, and I'm going to do it in the way that makes sense. Now, that's going to be counter to what a buying company wants. They want that. They want you to have that, but they want the money first. You can have your nice intangible stuff over here if you give us the money. If you produce the money, we'll let you have the way you want to do it, your culture. If you don't give us the money, then you got to do it our way, and our way is going to be the hard way. And it's not going to be everything you just talked about. So I think there's a lot of it is where I think our leaders have to have the guts to be able to stand up for the people that they believe in. And the people have to respect that too. The people that I'm standing up for have got to respect that. I'm standing up against the storm right here. But we do need production, right? Because we got to make money. We do have to make a profit. We all have to make a profit. We all want to get paid. I don't know. I think the other thing is that, and maybe this will happen. Maybe some of the companies that would sell, maybe they'll find another way to transition the seller out, without selling the company to another company. Maybe there's some kind of a transition of ownership. Maybe there's going to be some kind of a local community or regional collective that acquires businesses that does believe in quality. Because I think most customers, that's what they want. They don't want you to come into their house and sell me $1,500 repair when all it really was going to be $200 or $300, but you don't get paid commission unless you sell it for $1,500. None of the homeowners want a deal. They don't want to be on the other end of that either. I don't think businesses are going to do it for us. I think the people that are leaders are going to have to stand up, and they're going to be the ones that have to do it, because I don't see the businesses backing off of the push for revenue and metrics and all that.
No, I completely agree with that. It's going to come down to the people that are controlling the people doing it on the day to day basis.
Yeah.
Um, what's a piece of advice that you would give technicians who want to have a long term career path that eventually leads them out of the field?
Okay. Um, so a lot of technicians are, and I was this way for a long, long time, and I'm still this way to some degree. A lot of us are kind of change averse. We don't like change. We get in routines. We get in a little bit of a rut. We like the same thing. We like to go to work. We know what we're going to do, and we don't want our day to get all screwed up, and we don't want the unknowns, unforeseens. Um, if you like the routine of the technician's job, and the longer you stay in that, the more it gets ingrained into you, the more it becomes who you are. And you identify yourself with that. And if you do that for 15 or 20 years, it's pretty hard to get out at that time to move into the field, unless there's some opportunity, somebody dies or retires. We always used to joke the only way you get out of the field in the office is if the service manager died or retired, right? Because then there was no other opening. Somebody had to move out to give an opening up there. So I think that's one thing. And I had a guy tell me this one time when I was trying to get out of the field. And he said, Brett, he goes, the longer you stay in the field, the harder it's going to be for you to get out of the field. And there was a couple reasons. For you become very good at what you do. So then they don't want to take you out of the field, take a really good technician and put you and become a really bad supervisor. Nobody wants to make that. And the other thing is that, especially now with wages at least back where they should be, they weren't like this when I was doing this in the 80s. And he would say, well, you could go from a technician making, I don't know, $35 an hour or whatever the number is. And then you can move into a rookie supervisor or a rookie salesman who doesn't make that much. So now you got to take this step down in pay to have this promotion into the office. That could be out there also, where sometimes technicians go, well, I can't. I've taken a pay cut 3 times in my career. I had 3 kids and I took a 15% pay cut one time, and I had 3 kids all in grade school and for an opportunity. And I wasn't the most popular guy when I came home that day and told my wife what that was all about. But don't be afraid of change. Don't be afraid of opportunities. Don't be afraid about taking on more responsibility. And if you really want to get out of it, you got to learn how to communicate with different people. You got to learn how to communicate with office people. You got to learn how to communicate with salespeople. Learn how to communicate with customers, not as a tech to a tech, but as a person to a different person. Because if I can communicate with different people, then all of a sudden they go, well, it'd be easier to put Brett in this role because I know he can talk to customers because I've seen him do it. So, and then also, a lot of times technicians don't ask for opportunities. A lot of times we just kind of sit and wait for them. Sometimes it's okay to go tell your boss, if you feel comfortable, and say, hey, if there's an opportunity to learn something new or do something different, I'd be interested. Not that I want to get out of being a tech, not that I'm going to walk out the door. I'm just thinking about when I'm over the age of 45 and my knees hurt, my hands hurt, my elbows hurt. I'm tired of climbing ladders and all that kind of stuff.
With all of that said, this question may be a bit of a loaded question because you kind of answered it in some ways. But, as a final takeaway, after 40 plus years in this industry, what's the one most important piece of advice you could leave listeners with today?
I would say, don't think you know it all, because none of us know it all. We know what we know, and we may know a lot, but I would say just be open-minded. And I read this quote one time. It says, you live like you're going to die tomorrow and you learn like you're going to live forever. So I would say just be open-minded, continue to learn things, be kind of that. I don't want to say be a sponge because that sounds a little hokey, but you want to continue to learn from people around you. If you get complacent, you get stuck, you think, man, I'm where I'm going to be forever. I'm going to stop listening. I stop learning. You're going to be there forever. So no matter what your job is, man, there's always more to learn. I guarantee you that there is always more to learn about this industry or any industry. So I would say just be a continual learner.
Well, Brett, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. We talked about a lot of very interesting things, and I'm actually kind of excited when I can listen back to some of this and really digest a little bit more of it, because sometimes I don't always get to absorb everything quite as much when I'm also trying to make sure I'm going to ask the right questions. But this has been a really fun and interesting conversation. So thank you so much for your time. Again, anyone, if you're listening and you want access to Brett's book, I will make sure I put a link in the resource hub once this show goes live. So everybody, thank you so much for listening, and I hope y'all have a great weekend. Peace.
Thanks, Rhydon.
And that's another one in the books, Trade Crew. If this episode brought you value, make sure you like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. Share this episode with your friends, your coworkers, your install team, your sales reps, and anyone else in the trades that need to hear it. And if you've got a voice, a story, or a lesson that the trades need to hear, this show is built for you. Head over to hvacrnd.com, use the show questionnaire link, or hit the links at any of our social bios, and make sure to give me your information so I can get you booked in for an episode of the show. Because if you're from the trades and you've got something worth saying, HVAC R&D is your platform. Until next time, keep evolving, keep serving, and keep the conversation going. Collaboration over competition always wins, so ramble on, Trade Crew.